Welcome to this new video. This time I want to go over the CEH version 13 exam. What we're going to do, we're going to cover 15 questions of each of the modules they have. So you're going to be better prepared for your exam and hopefully you're going to nail it. Now, if you're new to cybersecurity, I'm sure that you have heard of CEH. That's one of the many cybersecurity certifications that you can take. I know that some people agree with it, some people don't, but the truth is that it is a valid certification, one of the many. I wouldn't say just stay with CEH if you want to stay in cybersecurity, but it's a beginner's certification. It's a good certification to have, and it's valid, right? So if you don't have much experience, you can say, you know what, I've taken the training, I'm moving forward, and I'm continuing with this. So in the official documentation for the exam, you're going to see the different modules that they're going to cover. The first one, and that's what we're going to be doing today, is Introduction to Ethical Hacking. Then we're going to be doing footprinting, scanning, enumeration, so on and so forth. Now, something that you have to keep in mind is that, like any other technical exam, there is a line between knowing the subjects in theory and doing that in practice, having the experience. Now, whether you have the experience, what you have to understand is that knowing and having the experience does not mean that you are going to nail or pass the test. You have to learn how to answer the questions, whether you agree or disagree with them if you want to be certified. And if you don't have the experience, you have to then learn the overall concept of the question so you're going to be able to perform better at the exam. So let me bring the first couple of questions and you are gonna write the answer or try to see what the answer is, and then I'm gonna cover the correct answer from this question. So the first question is, what is the primary goal of ethical hacking? Out of all these options, to gain unauthorized access to system, to identify vulnerabilities and fix them, to steal sensitive information, or to test hardware efficiency, what do you think is the correct question? So the correct question is B, to identify vulnerabilities and fixing them. Ethical hacking is going to identify vulnerabilities. That's your primary job, to identify them, document them, and hopefully working with the other departments in the organization, fix the vulnerabilities. So let's move to the next question. Which of the following is not a phase of ethical hacking? So ethical hacking has many different, I'm going to call them stages or phases. It's a protocol that they want you to follow. Again, this is 100% something in theory. In practice, you can be more flexible. But what is the, which of the following is not a phase of ethical hacking? So in this case, the correct answer to this question is D. Incident response is a solution, is a process in and of itself. It has nothing to do with identifying vulnerabilities or recovering vulnerabilities. It's just a complete different process altogether. Now let's move to question number 3. What document is essential for ethical hackers to obtain before starting an engagement? What do you think the answer to this question is? So the correct answer to this question is a penetration testing agreement. Now, if you're new into cybersecurity, most likely you're not going to be performing a pen test. Maybe you're going to be working for an organization that is going to be performing the pen test. And if you are the junior security engineer, you're going to tag along a senior engineer to understand the process. And your company then is going to create a statement of work and a pen testing agreement, which is a legal document or a document that is going to outline the pen test and the engagement. so that your organization, and in this case, or you, are protected against any um, lawsuits if something happens to one of the systems. Now let's go to question number 4. Which of these is a non-technical type of ethical hacking? So what do you think the right answer for this is? Which of these is a non-technical type of ethical hacking? And the correct question for that is C. Social engineering is just the gathering of information, it's putting the information together, it's putting it two and two, it's you utilizing your analytical thinking, not so much your technical skills, but the analytical thinking to come up with the right answer or the right procedure for what you are doing. Now let's go to question number 5. What type of hacker aims to improve security without malicious intent? That is a good question. This is 100% theoretical. This has nothing to do in real world in practice, but it's a question that I'm sure you're going to see in your exam. What type of hacker aims to improve security without malicious intent? You have black hat, white hat, gray hat, and a script kiddie. So, and the answer to this question is white hat, and that's one of those terms that has been around since forever. Black hat is like the hacker that you see on TV, malicious actors. The white hat is the ethical hacker, somebody who improves the security of the organization you're testing, conducting audits. And then you have gray hat, which is a combination of black and white. To be honest with you, I don't know the practicality of that. Probably somebody who's trying to break into something and something else. And a script kiddie is just a term for people who don't necessarily know about cybersecurity, but they know of the tools and they just run the tools hoping for the best, like throwing a Hail Mary. Now let's move to question number 6, and that is, which of the following best describes a zero-day vulnerability? And this is something that you hear on the news quite often. Which of the following best describe a zero-day vulnerability? What do you think the proper answer to this question is? And the answer to this question is C, a vulnerability that is unknown to the vendor and has no fix as of the time of the release of the vulnerability. So this is very common, and again, like, it happens a lot because a lot of vendors, they just put out things knowing that they have bugs, or maybe they don't know that they have bugs, and then somebody finds a vulnerability and they publish the vulnerability and there's no fix for that. So what do you do when that happens? That's a question that I have for you that is not part of these questions. What do you do if you know of a vulnerability that has no fix? You have to find compensating security control for that. And that's another part of cybersecurity and information security. Let's move to question number 7. What is the primary purpose of reconnaissance during a penetration test? And we have the following options: to exploit vulnerabilities in the system, to gather information about the target, to escalate privileges, to create phishing attacks. What do you think is the primary purpose of reconnaissance during a penetration test? And the right question is B, to gather information about the target, and that's what reconnaissance is going to do. When you're doing reconnaissance, just as the term implies, you're going to collect as much information using technical tools or open source, I'm not going to say open source, technical tools, or your intuition, not intuition, your abilities to find publicly available information to create a profile of your target. So that is the primary purpose of that. You're not gonna really exploit any vulnerabilities. That's part of exploitation. You're not gonna escalate any privileges because you have to exploit that first. And you're not gonna create any phishing attacks. They're just throwing you off with that question. It's not relevant at all. I mean, with that option. So question number A, what is an ethical hacker's responsibility after identifying a critical vulnerability? So you are working on an engagement and you find a vulnerability that you know it has publicly available exploits and nobody in the organization knows except you. What is your responsibility? Your options are exploit the vulnerability, inform the organization, patch the vulnerability without informing anyone, or ignore it if it's out of scope. And the correct answer to these questions is inform the organization immediately of the vulnerability. Don't exploit it. I mean, they're just like, it doesn't make any sense. Don't patch it without informing. Even, I mean, patching, to be honest with you, patching vulnerabilities may not even be part of the engagements, right? So just inform the organization. That's what you need to do. Now, I'm gonna throw you a real life experience. The fact that you find a critical vulnerability on a system does not mean that the organization is going to act immediately to address that vulnerability. There's an other aspect of the business called risk management. And maybe the organization is willing to take the risk of that vulnerability getting exploited, right? And that's something that has nothing to do with you. Early in my career, I used to get very frustrated when I found vulnerabilities that were critical, and when I informed people, it just fell on deaf ears. They didn't do anything, and I used to be frustrated for that. I was like, how is it possible that people are not passionate about fixing vulnerabilities? You know what? It is a business. There's another aspect of the business that you may not be aware of. Your job is inform immediately, document it, and move on. Let's go to question number 9. Which ethical hacking framework provides guidelines for penetration testing? MITRE, PTES, OWASP, ISO 27001. And the question is pretty simple and straightforward. I'm not gonna let you guess that is PTES. PTES stands for Penetration Testing Execution Standards and provides guidelines for conducting penetration testing. It's kind of a framework that you're gonna follow, like best practices, like providing a framework. MITRE is a complete different framework to identify vulnerabilities and attacks. OWASP is a complete different thing. They're an organization to improve web security, and ISO is an information security framework that has nothing to do with pen testing. So let's go to question number 10. What is the difference between penetration testing and vulnerability assessment? Oh, this is a great question because some people think that running a vulnerability assessment means doing a pen test, or they think that doing a pen test, they automatically are going to perform a vulnerability assessment. Two complete different things. And your options are penetration testing is broader than vulnerability assessment. The other option, vulnerability assessment, focuses on exploitation, while penetration testing focuses on discovery. The other option, penetration testing, exploits vulnerabilities. Vulnerability assessments identifies them. And D is they do the same. What do you think the difference between pen testing and vulnerability assessment is? And the answer to this question is C. Penetration testing exploits vulnerabilities. Vulnerability assessments just identifies them, right? You can do a vulnerability assessment and find all vulnerabilities and not try to exploit them. You are just identifying them. That's part of cybersecurity hygiene best practices. And you can do a pen test and not find all vulnerabilities, which is kind of strange, right? Usually pen tests are more targeted for many different reasons, and they may not look at the entire architecture to find vulnerabilities. It all depends on the scope of work, on the engagement. But the main purpose of pen testing is to exploit vulnerabilities, right? Unlike vulnerability assessments that just identifies them. Question 11. What is the key ethical principle of an ethical hacker? That's a very philosophical question. Perform attacks without permission. I mean, it doesn't smell right. Obtain explicit consent from the target organization. Makes sense. Exploit vulnerabilities to demonstrate your expertise. Show off. Share findings with competitors. What is the key ethical principle of an ethical hacker? What do you think? And as you can imagine, the correct answer to this question is B. Obtain explicit consent from the target organization. You want to make sure that before you run the first scan to start your engagement, that you are authorized to do that. It is illegal to break into a system you don't have authorization on. So make sure that you use common sense for that. Let's go to question 12. Which of the following is considered active reconnaissance? And again, this is a question that is 100% theory. This does not apply in the real world. It doesn't matter when you're doing something online, when you're like in an engagement, if you're using passive, active. Sometimes it's confusing, but this is something that you need to know for the exam. Which of the following is considered active reconnaissance? You have searching public records, scanning a network for open ports, reviewing social media profiles, and searching DNS records. And the answer to this question is B. Scanning a network for open ports. And again, this is a question that is 100% theoretical just for the exam. It has zero real life implications when you're doing this in real life. But it's something you need to know for the exam. So if you are confused with active reconnaissance or passive reconnaissance, think of passive as something that you are not implementing direct technical tools or tools that are going to directly touch your target, right? If you're looking for public records, that's everything is out there, reviewing social media. Whereas if you are like probing a host, then that's like active. Again, this is 100% theoretical, has nothing to do with real life. Let's go to question 13. What is a red team exercise? The options are a vulnerability assessment performed by ethical hackers, a simulated cyber attack to test defenses, a training session for employees, a policy review exercise. What is a red team exercise? The correct answer to this question is B, a simulated cyber attack to test defenses. The concept of red team, blue team, purple team are concepts, again, in theory that are mostly implemented in large organizations where they have the different segments of cybersecurity divided. So you have a team of people who are trying to test the defenses that another team has implemented to see if they can break into it, and they all work together. They all work for the same organization. They are just testing the defenses. And a red team exercise is more practice, more proactive. It's more probing. So if you want to get into cybersecurity and you're interested into red team things, hey, you go in there, you're gonna be like testing things and breaking things. That's good for you. Whereas you have another people like making sure that the servers are secure, that they've tested all the configurations to make sure that nobody can break into it. Question 14. Which hacking technique involves guessing credentials to gain unauthorized access? The options are social engineering, password cracking, brute force attack, and phishing. What do you think the proper answer is? And the correct answer is C, right? Brute force attack involves when you systematically try all possible combinations of the credentials to break into it. So that's what you have to think about it, right? Like if you want to get an unauthorized access and you are like guessing the credentials, you are brute forcing your way into the system or attempting. The other options are not it. Social engineering, not really. You're not trying to trick anything here. Password cracking, yeah, not really. You're just involving one password, not brute forcing, and then phishing is something that they throw in there as to throw you off because it has nothing to do with that. And the last question, what is the primary reason ethical hackers use open source intelligence, OSINT for short, to create malware to gather information on targets, legally to avoid detection during penetration testing, to simulate phishing attacks? What do you think the primary reason for ethical hackers to use open source intelligence is? And the correct answer is B, to gather information on targets legally. Now, open source intelligence is when you use many different tools to collect publicly available information to create a profile of your target. At that moment, you are not creating any malware, you are not touching anything technical, you're not probing any host, you're not performing any vulnerability assessment or anything. You're just collecting information. So thank you for watching this video number 1 of our series for ethical hacking. Again, in this case, we cover the first module, which is Introduction to Ethical Hacking. When you take your exam, don't think too hard, use common sense, do your study, and go for the best answer. If something doesn't feel right, just ignore that. You're going to see a lot of options that don't make any sense for the question they ask. In the next video, we're going to cover footprinting and reconnaissance, and then we're going to continue with all 20. If you found this information valuable, if you benefited from it, all I ask you for you is to click on the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you know of anyone else who is studying for the CEH exam, forward this information over to them. If you have any questions about the answers or any of the topics that we covered in Module 1, Introduction to Ethical Hacking, let me know and I try to answer to the best of my abilities. Thank you for watching and I will talk to you on the next video.